Hi, welcome to this week's With Liberty and Justice for Some. I'm Congressman Mark Pocan. With me today for our one question is Wisconsin's Secretary of State and former state treasurer. That's a whole other story, but we've got a podcast on it. Sarah Godlewski. Sarah, thanks for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Mark.
So, Sarah, my question for you is: if you had the power to just without having to worry with the crazy people I serve with in Congress to pass something, but if you had the power to change any one federal law or make a federal law, what would that one federal law be that you'd like to do to help improve the life of people in Wisconsin?
Oh my gosh. That's that's a good one because I'm thinking about everything from democracy and
Hmm.
rights because we have seen, for example, in states like Wisconsin, how gerrymandering can just sever the voice of so many people.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a voice, then how can you actually truly represent people who
Hmm.
can then actively be your voice um, in Congress and seeing our, representatives across the country. So I think for me, but then at the same time, I still look at this abortion ban and how we haven't been able to, um, actually pass a law that makes these rights, these fundamental rights that are a part of our liberty, a part of the Constitution. So I guess, so that's why it's a tough one, Mark, because
Two of
it's
them
like,
there. Okay, that's all right. You know what? We will give you the ability to split that into two laws that you could change because you are very torn, I can tell. So,
yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say I'm torn because I feel like we need something with regards to gerrymandering
yeah.
and ensuring that that doesn't happen. Like, we are seeing that right now, even though we win statewide, we only have you and Glenn are our 2 congressional representatives. Like, help me understand the math on that.
Yeah.
And so it would be something to address gerrymandering. But as I said, we've been fighting these abortion bans that are literally, I mean, we're seeing women die as a result. And we need to pass a law to get that done too.
So stop gerrymandering and codify Roe versus Wade or whatever we need to do to make sure that women are treated like equal citizens in
Yes,
making decisions
correct.
about their bodies. That's
Correct.
awesome. Thank you
Correct.
so much, Sarah, for being with us today.
Yeah, it was a good question, Mark. Thanks for asking it.
The labor movement is as strong as it's been in decades in America. Why? Well, people want to have a say in their workplace and people wanted to be treated fairly. It's really that simple. Public opinion towards organized labor is at a half century high for good reason. When you look at much of the economic landscape right now, those who are the wealthiest are just at a huge advantage between the tax bills that help the rich get richer to the cracking down by bad corporations on workers' attempts to unionize. More than ever, we need a strong labor movement. And the movement is moving into areas that have never been organized before, which is great. But also, you're seeing some in the labor movement speak out about broader economic and social justice issues, as it is all connected. How we treat women and people of color and workers internationally, all human rights issues relate to how workers are treated here. And there's few in the labor movement who are more outspoken on this broader agenda than the general president of my union. That's right, my union of over 3 decades, the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, 140,000 members strong. And our general president is Jimmy Williams. Jimmy Williams is a fourth generation glazer from Philadelphia. He took office in 2021 and has traveled the country visiting union locals everywhere, including in Madison. Thank you for stopping by and speaking out on behalf of workers and human rights everywhere. Welcome, Jimmy.
Congressman, thanks so much. And, most importantly, though, thank you for always being so proud to be a part of our union. It just makes me proud. And I know it makes our members proud every time you mention the fact that you're a proud IUPAT, both member and have been a great employer and a great voice for us in Capitol Hill, too. So thank you, too.
Well, no, thanks. I mean, I'll tell you that there aren't enough of us in Congress, right? I think half of Congress are lawyers. I think that might be a little skewed. And I think half of Congress are millionaires. And the only way you really get representative democracy is by having people, who represent all of us. And no, I'm very, very glad to. Jimmy, what brought you to the union movement?
Man, it's a great question. I get asked it all the time. For me, it's basic. It's very generational.
Mhm.
I'm a fourth generation member. My great grandfather was a charter member of my local back in Philadelphia prior to
Oh,
even
wow.
the right for unions to exist. He joined and formed our local union in 1917, and I've seen firsthand both the benefits of what it meant for our family to advance generationally between my great grandfather to my grandfather to my father, and being involved in the union was something that it wasn't like, hey, you have a choice. It was like, we owe, and we have to get back to the generations that have built the union advantage. And from a very young age, I've always just been involved in the union, been a part of the union, and it's something that was very generational for me.
Yeah, in fact, your dad was the union president when I got elected to Congress, and occasionally when I would receive a text, I wasn't sure which Jimmy Williams I was getting the text from. So, no, that's great. Let people know about our union. So, IUPAT, International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. I was part of the sign and display division, which I think is one of the smallest parts of the union. But explain who are some of the members.
Yeah, our members, we're mostly construction workers. We represent, I mean, people here are painters, but we represent the most number of apprenticeable crafts of any union in the building trades.
Wow.
We represent people that finish drywall, put in floors. We represent people like myself. I installed glass for a living. We represent folks that put on industrial coatings on bridges, tanks, infrastructure work, and then also obviously our commercial painters, wall covers, but we also have a very wide variety of folks that are in our union, from sign and display workers that work in trade shows, people that work in plants and shops. We have public employees that work for state and county um, offices, from bus drivers to teachers assistants. We have a very, very diverse union.
Yeah, in fact, I think some of those public employees are in Iowa, right next to me, if I remember right.
That's right.
Yeah. So I'm looking at your shirt, and my next question I had is exactly your shirt says it's better in a union. And my question is, why are people better off in a union? So clearly we were thinking alike. But why are people better off being in a union?
I mean, the union movement is literally the only vehicle for workers to have a voice in their workplace, and it is literally the only institution that stands in the way from corporations and large employers from controlling the economic standing for the working class in this country. And over the course of our existence, it is proven to be the advantage that workers have in a honestly in an economy that's stacked against them.
Mhm.
Our union movement has been able to build some of the most amazing things, from the 8-hour workday to the highest wages in most industries, to benefits like pension funds, defined benefit pension plans, which don't exist much in the private sector these days anymore, to healthcare plans, to the establishment of OSHA. I mean, the union movement has always been the one movement that has stood in the way from corporations and unfettered capitalism from just being able to run rampant over workers.
Yeah. And what is it that you like best about your position as general president? I know you're unique, I feel, in that how much you've already traveled around the country to our locals, but what is it that you like best?
It's that, Mark. It's talking to our members directly, to be able to really stay in touch with what are their needs. I mean, oftentimes, I think organized labor has tried to jam a square peg into a round hole,
Mhm.
and tell workers like, hey, this is what you need. But within our union, we've really spent a lot of time trying to listen to our members and find out the things that matter the most to them. And I think it's given us an ability to be different than maybe some others, because we've come up with some creative things. Like when we spoke to our women members, in the construction industry there was never a maternity leave policy, and in just talking to our members, a woman who works in construction, they can't wait till they're 2 months from giving birth before they stop employment. They're working around hazardous material. They need more time off, and things like that. Talking to our members about maybe possibly bargaining for more paid time off. Quality of life matters more sometimes than wages to some of our members, and being able to listen to them and really meet our members where they're at has been probably the most exciting part of the work that I do.
Yeah, because you guys did, was it a bus tour or a van tour or something as you went around?
Yeah, we did and that was mostly for our political efforts leading into the election because we knew how important this election was and what a crossroad it was. But we've continued that since the election. Every week we're in our district councils holding seminars where we're educating our members about workers' rights and educating our members about the history of working people's economy here in this country because a lot of the attacks on labor are not new.
Right.
Um, they're formed in different maybe ways, and they're maybe a little more aggressive, and obviously a lot more aggressive in under the Trump administration. But organized labor has been on our heels since 1947. That's just the truth.
Yeah. So why do you think, I mean, we are at about a 50-year high in public opinion right now with unions. Why do you think that is?
I think it's simple, honestly. I think, far too many people are looking into it saying, why are workers more interested in labor unions today than they were maybe say 30 or 40 years ago? And I think it's quite simple. I think that the erosion of good working class jobs in this country has been taking place now for 40, 50, 60 years. I believe it's been going on for three generations. I'm going to be, and my children are probably going to be the first two generations that have actually slid backwards in this economy.
Yeah.
And I think when workers, look at really how the economy works for them and they realize that living paycheck to paycheck and far too many people not having enough savings in their accounts to even decide between paying groceries or paying their electric bill if they're out of work. I think it's pretty obvious why people are looking for alternatives like labor unions to change their dynamic in the workplace.
And is there anything that we need to do different within labor for these current times that we're in than maybe we've done in the past?
Yeah, I really believe that there's a tendency to sometimes within organized labor to retreat when we're out of favor with the current government or if we feel like we're under attack. I think that would be the biggest mistake we could ever make. I think right now is the perfect opportunity to take workers through an organizing drive to show them just how broken the system really is. It's one thing for us to talk about it as leaders. It's one thing for political figures that support our interests to be able to talk about it. But at this point in our country's history, we need to really create a movement that shows workers just how screwed up America's labor laws are and how slanted they are against the working class so that we can build a movement to fight for real change.
Yeah, and you've been one of the most outspoken uh, presidents, bluntly, at least that I'm seeing in the media. You're getting out there and you're talking about it. And I think a couple times now you've talked about this current administration. Can you talk about what you're seeing with the current Trump administration and how it affects our members and other union members?
Yeah, I mean, there is not one thing to point to where you can't say this is going to affect organized labor, but mostly the working class, right? I mean, every single move that this administration has been done to benefit those at the top. I mean, it's just that simple. It started with the attacks on the federal employees. It continues with Trump's absolute deranged belief that every single immigrant in this country is somehow exploitable, disposable, and at this point in time, I mean, I honestly think most average people in this country are like, whoa, wait a second, this is not what we voted for. I know I'm already hearing that amongst our membership. And it just continues with the cuts to all of the standards that have been fought for with things like NIOSH, OSHA, defunding the government, removing a sitting board member of the NLRB. I mean, the things that the administration has done, and I think far too often people focus on what happened that day and don't see it as a package, but this package is real. And from day one when he stood next to all the different tech billionaires, that the
Yeah.
plan was to cut the workforce and turn it over to the private sector so that people can profit off of our government. I mean, that's what's happening.
Yeah, that's long been my theory, especially on Elon Musk when he was involved. He clearly had an AI company. AI is what many see as a way to replace workers, and I think as he was trying to grab all of our data and everything, he wanted advantage on the other AI companies, and once you get to the crowd that hangs out at Mar-a-Lago, they're pretty cutthroat on a lot of areas.
Yeah, and then where can people get just literally their whole lives upended? I mean, we've had so many horror stories from our members who say, their wives may have worked for the federal government or family members that spend all that time wondering if they're even going to have a job and then ultimately have it cut anyway. I mean, it's been tough times.
If it's all right, I would like to, because what I find, and I would, I try not to say this in front of my colleagues, but as you know, not every member of Congress is well versed in working people's issues and labor's issues like they should be, in my opinion. And I think sometimes there's some basic issues and terminology that's super relevant for people to understand. And then let's talk about some of the legislation that's out there. But I'd like to start with registered apprenticeships. So, you hear people talk a lot about apprenticeships, but there's a difference between a registered apprenticeship and a regular apprenticeship. Can you talk a little bit about the value and what is a registered apprenticeship?
Yeah, right. I mean, and the registered apprenticeship system that the Department of Labor has been implementing now for over 60, 70 years is the pathway for folks into good middle class, working class jobs within the trades for the most part. And we do have to expand registered apprenticeships into other industries, but we have a model within the construction industry that has worked now for, generations. And registered apprenticeships are ones that have to live up to standards. They have to have graduation rates. Folks that work in a registered apprenticeship program, they're working under a collective bargaining agreement for the most part. They're tied directly to government funded projects so that if the government's going to invest in building a building or doing a new highway or any sort of major infrastructure project, registered apprenticeship programs are the only way for people to actually work on those projects. It's a direct investment in the workforce. And the registered apprenticeship system is has proven to be the best, self-funded post post-secondary education system in the country for the working class for generations. Why screw with it? We say all the time within the construction industry, on every given year we're investing over $1.5 billion in workforce training directly. It's not the federal government. The federal government oversees it, monitors it, makes sure that we're living up to the standards. If you turn that over to industry, I guarantee you that if you just turned it over to corporate interests, it'll be something on paper with no teeth. There won't be any real pathways for folks to work under collective bargaining agreements or in the middle class. And that's what we put at risk when we start taking away things that actually work for working people.
And there are apprenticeships that you've seen, I'm sure, that are nothing like a registered apprenticeship other than using the word apprenticeship.
Absolutely. It's a way to pay workers less. There's no infrastructure behind it. Like within our union, we spend over $150 million a year. We have training centers in every major metropolitan area of the country. We have training centers and outposts in all of the states in this country where we pay full-time trainers to do hands-on training, health and safety training. It's a true workforce training model that works. And if you turn that over without any oversight or regulation to industry, it's just going to be a paper tiger.
And the standards are, I know when I went and visited our facility up in St. Paul for our union, I think they qualify for community college credits, a lot of the classes also, right?
And we've gone as far as accrediting our own apprenticeship programs where we can grant
Yeah.
associate's degrees by going through the Department of Education and becoming registered as secondary education vehicle. And like that's unheard of. That's people that don't have to pay to even go to college. They're working and earning and receiving the value of an associate's degree through their 4-year apprenticeship program. I mean, it works.
Yeah. So lesson number one, registered apprenticeship is very different than apprenticeship. And anything we can do to keep the current model that again is not taxpayer dollars, it is the money from, you know, workers and the industry putting in to do this is coming from registered apprenticeships. So
1,000. Mark, I would say, I mean, and I can say this, we receive zero
yeah,
dollars in government assistance for our apprenticeship programs.
yeah. And some Republicans would claim that's too much. That's all right. That's another story. Davis Bacon. You hear about Davis Bacon. Sometimes a Republican in Congress will say, "I support Davis Bacon," but there's never actually been really a vote on Davis Bacon. But what is Davis Bacon, and why is it so important?
Yeah, and honestly, Davis Bacon is probably a term that means absolutely nothing to 95% of
Yeah.
the people in this country, but it is so critical to maintaining the standards that are in the public investment on construction. And what Davis Bacon is the Department of Labor administers what they call their prevailing wage program through Davis Bacon, where every county in this country has a prevailing wage on what a construction worker should make if working on a federally funded construction project. And in most instances, that's the prevailing wages are the collectively bargained wages of union workers that have bargained over generations, contracts with employers in that local community. And what it does is it protects the public's investment to make sure that if the federal government's going to put true funding into construction projects, that the workers that are working on that project are being paid a high standard of living and are being paid wages that work for that location in the country so that they can reinvest in the economy, so that they can, pay their local taxes, so they can feed their families and be a part of the community. I mean, prevailing wages and Davis Bacon are truly something that protects the taxpayer's interest more so than anything else.
Yeah, and the benefit is you get highly trained and qualified people doing those jobs, so you don't have someone who is inexperienced, and when that window is going on a 12th story of a building, uh, you're going to have issues about whether or not it's safe for everybody involved.
Yeah, and the private sector wants to do everything they can to destroy Davis Bacon and prevailing wages so that there's no ceiling for wages for workers, that there's only a basement
Mhm.
and that workers can be paid less.
Yeah. Um, how about one more term, and then we'll go to some legislation? But I just think this is so helpful. Right to work laws. So right now, it sounds good, right to work, right? If everyone should have a right to work, right? I know we often call it right to work for less laws because that's another terminology. But what does right to work mean? Wisconsin was not a right to work state until Scott Walker made us one. We had a pretty strong history here, but explain what right to work is.
Yeah, right to work simple. I mean, it was passed in 1947 in the Taft-Hartley bill, and it amended the National Labor Relations Act, which is the law that governs how unions operate in this country. And it was a clear attempt to attack unions at a time period where unions were at our strongest. I think in the at the time of the passage of the act. There was 87% of all construction workers in this country were members of unions, which is
Wow.
an amazing time period.
Yeah.
Uh, and it was a direct response. So what right to work does is it gives states the ability to enact laws that basically say if you are a member of a union or work in a union environment through a collective bargaining agreement, you don't have to pay dues to the union. And by not having to pay dues to the union, you basically defund the operation that represents workers, that invests in organizing, and is the vehicle to which keeps the institution moving. And it started in the 50s and 60s in southern states in this country. They passed right to work laws very quickly. And what you seen was in the manufacturing sector in the Midwest, a lot of the jobs moved from the strong, upper Midwest and the Northeast down into the South and right to work states where workers chose not to pay dues into their union for their representation and for their unions organizing efforts, and it completely dismantled workers' rights and abilities to collectively bargain higher wages. And it's been that way since 1947. And what you see was states in the upper Midwest during the time period of Scott Walker and others enact right to work laws like Southern right to work laws states did back in the 50s and 60s. And it's a scam for workers. It does not work, and it is proven over time.
And for the public, what you lose, if you lose the unions, you also lose the training through the registered apprenticeships, the quality of workers that you got through that specialized training. And suddenly, maybe there's a reason why those buildings that were built in 1947 in that era, still are around, right? Because you had good, qualified, trained workers, and you lose that if you lose the unions.
Yeah, and you know what you lose the most, Mark? You lose the check and balance on corporate America.
Yeah.
And unions are the only check and balance to corporate America's unwilling desire to just drive wages down and increase profits. I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah. Thanks for going through the 101 with me, because I think it's helpful for people to learn some of these basic terms that get talked about. There's a flagship bill. Now let's go to legislation a little bit to help improve the lives of workers, called the PRO Act. It would help workers who want to organize and collectively bargain. It would penalize bad companies that retaliate against those who are trying to organize, and it would bar right to work states, what we just talked about. Why is the PRO Act so important?
I mean, I think it's the single most important piece of legislation for working people in this country because it gives working people the power over their employment and their economic standing. It doesn't force people to be in a union. It gives them a better choice and it gives them better options. And like I had mentioned about Taft-Hartley in 1947, there has not been any sort of pro-worker legislation since 1935 when the act was passed. So 1947 began the destructive rollback of workers' rights in this country. And,
Mhm.
I think it's shown in the economy when you see that CEO pay has grown to be so much more, in certain instances. I saw something the other day, it's over 300 to 1 for CEO to worker ratio
It
pay. It would be the first piece of checks and balances back on corporate America since 1947, and
is.
it's critical to the future of working people in this country. Because when at a time when workers want to be a part of a union, at a higher rate than it's ever been in my lifetime. When you talk about 70% of all working people and approaching 90% of all people under the age of 30, the only vehicle for working people to actually attain that is to pass the PRO Act to make it easier for workers to form and join unions.
And then there's a few things that are happening right now that are working against working people, and some of it even is coming through legislation, or they're blocking legislation to fix it. Couple things that bad employers do: one is employee misclassification, and another is wage theft. And can you just talk about what those are and why we need to have laws protecting workers when it comes to misclassification and wage theft?
Yeah, misclassification and wage theft in the construction industry is probably our number one issue, and probably the thing that has driven down workers' wages and working conditions in this country now for quite some time. I can tell you there is a model that the construction industry, the open shop, has used now for quite some time. And it basically operates like this. When a builder wants to build a building, whatever it may be, a hotel, a high rise, they hire a set of subcontractors,
Mhm.
and those contractors bid on the work. And I'll use drywall for example. If the contractor that wants to do the drywall on the project, it's going to cost $20 million for them to do it. They bid time, material, and labor. It's quite simple. That's how you bid a construction project. And what has creeped into our industry is that employer that secures that $20 million contract doesn't have one single employee. What
Yeah.
they have is 35, 40, what they call independent subcontractors that have to work at whatever that employer says. They get paid in 1099 at the end of the year. They are not hourly employees,
Mhm.
which is a complete violation of employment law in this country. Those workers, they're told what to do by their boss. They're told if you don't, work these 60 hours this week, or if you don't get this amount of material in, we're not going to pay you. That's where wage theft comes in. They skirt every single hourly working law in this country. And it is truly the model that is advanced into tech jobs now. That's exactly what Uber and Lyft
Yep.
and the model of the gig economy is using. But in the construction industry, it's been going on for 40, 50 years. And the amount of exploitation that exists in that is absolutely, sometimes mind-boggling. When you look at a construction site, you would think, those workers work for an employer. They're
Mhm.
not independent. but literally all you have to do is look at the nature of their employment to go, there's nothing independent about this. They're
Yeah.
told when to be there, they're told what they're going to get paid, and they're forced to work in some of the worst conditions in this country.
Yeah, my local business manager, Jeff Murhoff, I've worked with him on some of this. He's really great about being on top of this, working with some of the government contracts too, pointing out when they're using subcontractors in a way that's inappropriate. But this is something that right now I don't think you're going to see a positive change with the Trump administration, but we absolutely need to keep on top of this and reverse that all those uh, all that's already happened in this area. You talked about worker safety in this area, and that's one thing. Organized labor every year we have a Worker Memorial Day, recognizing people who've lost their lives in the workplace. In 2025, there's no reason anyone should go to work and not have full expectation that they're getting home to see their family at the end of the day. Can you talk about worker safety and unions specifically to our union?
Sure. I mean, the amount of health and safety training that we do is probably something that in the construction industry we should be the proudest of,
Yeah.
because there's such a difference. And we do work in dangerous environments. I mean, some of the work that our members perform, they're hanging off the side of massive bridges, hanging off the side of big skyscrapers. And the amount of progress that we've made in the health and safety world for our members is something that we're so proud of. But when you look at what this country's doing, when they talk about gutting some of the workplace standards, when they defund OSHA and defund NIOSH, it puts so many workers at risk. You're also seeing things like we should be advancing as a society, not going backwards. When you look at things like taking away the heat ruling so that workers aren't exposed to extreme heat, like that is just absolutely ridiculous in 2025, at a time where I can tell you it's been the hottest summer that I can remember.
Yeah.
And workers that are working in the construction industry are forced to work without any breaks, no water on the job. Like health and safety should never be something that goes backwards in the workforce in the most developed country in the free world. Like this is absolutely yet another attack that shows you where the working class really stands in
Mhm.
this country and who's the priority.
Yeah, I mean, we're actually fighting child labor laws. They're trying to bring back kids working in meat packing facilities across the country. It's really at a bizarre period of time, isn't it?
It is, and it's something that I never thought I would see in our country, where you can be that openly blatant in talking about things that are absolute, like what I would say, red lines for the working class. I saw somebody on Fox News yesterday. I saw a clip saying, "Well, I think it would be good if once we get rid of all the immigrant workers, we can put children to work again, because we should be putting children to work." Like, what country
Oh,
are we living in, Mark? You
yeah.
know?
No, it's it's very bizarre. Well, there's another reason that I appreciate you so much, and it's not just for what you do in the labor movement directly, but indirectly, because you have a huge moral compass, not just for workers, but you extend that to others. And your fight in the labor movement, you've been outspoken about other injustices out there, because again, it does all come back to how we treat people. It's going to matter how we treat workers. You've been especially outspoken about the genocide in Gaza. You've written about this, you've spoken about this. Why should workers care about what's happening halfway around the world?
It's interesting. A lot of people ask me why you would even, get involved in something like that. And I'll tell you, it's truly about working class solidarity. We
Mhm.
had a meeting with the Palestinian labor movement, where we got to hear directly from the leaders of the Palestinian labor movement. Because if Americans think we're the only country in the world that has an organized labor
Yeah.
movement, we're we're again we're again practicing this American exceptionalism that isn't real. I mean, workers in Palestine told their stories about trying to provide basic services, and hospital workers that had to work in these conditions where they were just being bombarded with bombs, and having to work in those conditions. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And I've said this, my father is a combat veteran in Vietnam, and my grandfather served in World War II. And like, working people are always the ones that are sent off to die and fight in wars. and working people have a vested interest in every single war that takes place on this planet. And we should always be on the side of peace. We should always be on the side of sitting down and talking. I mean, they're the fundamental things that we stand for the most, which is, hey, if we have to sit down and talk, let's sit down and talk and negotiate something better. But when working people are both fighting the wars and dying innocently, just trying to, feed their families, it's too easy to say we got to stop this.
Yeah, it's how you value human life, period, and how you value everybody. You just, in fact, I think it was last week you posted on Facebook. It's working class people that fight our wars. It's working class people that die in those wars, and it's things like that. And speaking out to our union members about what's happening in Gaza, or you were, I think, one of the first in the labor movement, not only to call for that ceasefire, but also to support the Black Lives Matter movement. Right, that was another issue you were outspoken on.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing about unions. You, if you think that just because a construction union should look maybe like me, you're crazy. We represent, well, almost 20% of our membership are Black members. And when what happened to George Floyd back in 2020, it triggered something very deep for many of our members. And if their union isn't out speaking on their behalf, then they have no place in their union. So it's very simple. I mean, these issues that people talk about are dividing us should actually be the issues that unite people within their union the most, to
Yeah.
know that they got a place to go for support. Same thing when the Dobbs decision came down
Mhm.
and women lost the right to choose, and Roe v. Wade was overturned. We have, we're approaching 10% women membership, and it's the fastest growing demographic in our union.
Mhm.
Are you crazy? Like, no, we have to support those members. So, I mean, to me, it's basic, and it's about supporting the causes that your membership that affect them in their home lives, in their communities. I mean, it shouldn't be as hard as sometimes we make it, because everybody politicizes everything.
Yeah. So speaking of politicizing, let's actually go just a drop into politics. This is official broadcast, so I can't vote for or vote against. But I would say, I'd like to ask what message that you have for elected officials of both parties, and especially any of those potential presidential candidates looking to get the support of working people. What do you want to say to them?
I would say this: the days of playing it safe, I think, need to go out the window for our political allies in the labor movement. I would say for all that seek to, hold public office, we can't play it safe. I think, there has to be a bold agenda for what working people really need in this country, and we got to be creative, and you got to be unwilling to compromise on certain things like wages, like retirement security, like healthcare security, like, really investing in the working class. And I think that message is the message that all people in this country want to hear. And it's been hijacked under the current administration, and it's been completely manipulated to have working people think that some guy who actually does not care one bit about them actually cares about them. So those that actually do need to step up, and they need to, create a vision that people can connect to and say, you know what, enough's enough. And playing it safe and just playing the political margins these days is not going to help working people into the future. It's only going to make matters worse. And I think it's that time where bold, creative strategies need to be on the table. We're still in a country that has a $7.25 minimum wage.
Right,
Like,
isn't it
that is
crazy? Yeah.
that is absolutely a slap in the face to what your values are, if you can't increase the minimum wage to something that people can actually live on. I mean, something that simple, yet it's so difficult, right?
Yeah. No, I remember during COVID a few years back, a supplier for our business we reached out to, and they were having all kinds of issues about shipping stuff out. I finally asked someone, about essentially their working, about what they get paid. They had people in a warehouse in Texas still making that minimum wage you just mentioned a few years ago. Well, no wonder. I mean, that's the problem. But Elon Musk has got plenty of political support. Maybe someone should be looking out more for the rest of us out there. And I think, your bold, unabashed advice to them is what people need to hear.
They do. They want to hear it, Mark. They
Yeah.
want to hear it.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add? I really appreciate your time today. It's been great having a conversation. And again, you are doing an amazing job, Jimmy. I'm proud that you're my general president, but also just so proud that you're in the labor movement, taking it all up a few notches to make sure that everyone is having labor is speaking out on behalf of everyone, not just members that they have in their union.
No, I would just say this, Mark, it goes both ways. I mean, to be the person and one of a few people within, the people's house to be able to put together a labor caucus and be willing to work across both aisles on labor's issues too, when need be. I think that's the leadership that all of our elected officials need to see, and being able to have a platform to say, no, this is where labor stands on these issues is so critical to the functioning and the health of our government that I appreciate everything you do for us.
Well, thank you. And I'm just glad that, we've got more folks working on labor in Congress now than ever in the history of the country, and having a labor caucus with a couple staff. And we're working on maybe a fellow coming to us and things. It's just added capacity, right? And it's going to help us do that. How do people follow you, Jimmy, both you personally and our union on social media?
Our union is always tagged at Go IUPAT, both on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those things. And me personally, I'm not a huge social media person, but I use, and I got to get off this platform, because I can't stand the guy who bought it. But I guess to you're better off maybe joining them if you're going to beat them. But I'm at Jimmy underscore IUPAT on Twitter, and there you can find my Blue Sky, you can find my Facebook, and all those things as well too.
Great. Well, I hope people do follow you because you are at the very front of where labor's moving, and people would be wise advised to. Thanks so much for your time today, Jimmy. I really appreciate it and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, Mark.